Go ahead.
The governing board study session of Monday, September 21st. Guidance of the public health officials, the college has closed facilities to the public and allows only restricted access for essential personnel to promote social distancing and limit the spread of the coronavirus. Accordingly, the governing board will conduct this meeting, as all meetings currently scheduled, through remote technology only. Members of the public interested in following the proceedings can do so via our Zoom webinar, and you can find all of the information on Pima.edu on the governing board page. The first item on our study session today is innovation in higher education at Pima. And to kick us off, I'm going to hand it over to Chancellor Lambert, who I think is going to give an introduction before we hear the various presentations. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Damien, and thank you, everyone, board members and employees and faculty and staff who may be watching, the audience and the community. We're really excited today to be able to showcase some of the great work that's been going on at Pima as it relates to innovations in higher education. So I'm going to have Nick get us started to talk a little bit about what innovations are, and then have different groups of the college really showcase different aspects of that. And I'll just say congratulations to start out with to our adult basic education team for bringing home a national recognition as another fine example of the great innovation going on at Pima Community College. And I told Lori earlier, I think that they took the IBEST model that we were doing in Washington State and have taken it to a whole new level. So it's just an example of what can be done when we really focus on doing things at being best in class. So thank you, Lori and team, and a lot goes to Regina as well, because she was here when all of that started to get off the ground. So thank you. And Nick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, great. Thank you, Chancellor. So I am going to share my screen. Give me a moment to get this set up. Here we go. All right, do you all see on your screen a slide that says Innovation Study Session? All right, good. I've got some nodding heads. Okay, good. So I am going to start off by setting the scene a little bit. And I'm going to review some materials, ask some questions, and talk about what innovation is. I'm going to talk big picture. And then, as the Chancellor mentioned, I'll transition to a number of colleagues who will share specific examples from Pima. Now, I'd like to invite everybody to play along if you would like to. So if you're watching on YouTube, if you're within the Zoom meeting, I'd like to invite you to go to a web browser and go to menti.com, which you see across the top of the screen. And once you get to that website, it will ask you to enter a code. And so go to menti.com and enter the code 9953455. And I see a few people are clicking in the bottom. Please do. It would be great to know how many people are participating within here. Now, we're going to be using Menti because it's very interactive. So I'm going to invite questions. I'm going to invite your input. And this way, as we go through this conversation, you will be able to hear from me, you'll hear from my colleagues, but also everyone listening can participate. So to set us off, I don't know if any of you have seen this building, the Dynamic Tower. This is designed, I believe it's destined for Dubai if it goes ahead and is built. It will be 420 meters high. It will be 80 floors, and each of the floors is designed to move separately. So you're not looking at 5 different towers here. You're seeing one tower, and each different floor, each different apartment, it can rotate separately from the others. And I include this as an example of innovation in other areas. The world is changing so quickly on us, and this is just one example. Now, before we talk about innovation, we need to start by thinking about the future. Innovation doesn't happen for the sake of innovation. It happens because things are changing. We are progressing into this unknown future, and changing how we do business and constantly adjusting is key to ensuring our offerings meet the need of our community. So let me start with a question for everybody. Do you think the world changed from 2010 through to 2020? All right. Overwhelming number of yeses. So, right, I mean, there's change happens all the time, right? Change is constant, as people often say. And this is great. It's good to see how many people are in here. We're up to 40 already, 43. Wonderful. Okay. So give me some examples of that. What kind of changes stand out to all of you as we think about this? Of course, we have the obvious one that we're all dealing with in the form of the pandemic. But yes, technology changes, partly in mobile, partly in other areas. As we often talk about the 4 superpowers, growth of automation. Ooh, cable TV is dead. I like cable TV still, but I still watch DVD sometimes. Yes, autonomous vehicles, smartphones, the rich got richer, true enough. So as we can see here, there's a wide variety of different changes that have occurred in the world. Yeah, pages are a thing of the past, right? So let me ask you a different question. Given that, do you think the world will change from 2020 to 2023? It's making me wonder. Are people pressing buttons? I can see a couple of you. I'm not sure why nothing is showing up. Interesting. Did I say hide the results? No. Oh, there they all are. Okay. All right. Okay. Everyone says yes. Okay. What kind of changes do you anticipate in the next 10 years? This is a somewhat tough question. Of course, it's much easier to look backwards than look forwards. Ooh, flying cars. That's kind of scary because flying cars probably are a thing that we may have 10 years from now. More AI, more automation, more mobile. Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. So lots of changes clearly showing up, shorter attention spans. Yeah, maybe. But a lot around technology and things in that area. So as you may have noticed, as you thought about that previous question, thinking about the future is hard. We're very well designed our brains for thinking about the present day, the history. But when we try and picture ourselves in the future, that can be very difficult to do. It can be harder to picture others in the future. It's just not really how we're wired to be able to do that. And there's a whole variety of research that relates to that, which doesn't really matter for us today. But what I want to do is do a very short exercise just to kind of get you all thinking about the future. This is a activity developed by the Institute for the Future. And I'm just going to invite you all to spend a couple minutes thinking about this particular scenario. So the activity is called the first 5 minutes of the future. And so what I want you all to think about is imagine you are in your homes. It's a regular day. It could be right now. This could be just about to happen. And you realize the internet is out. You also realize that there's no cell service. There's nothing broadcasting on TV or on radio, but you do find that the electricity is still working. But suddenly this change occurs. You don't know what's going on. There's no advance notice. It just suddenly isn't working. So I'm going to give you just a minute or two to think about this. How would you react? What would you do in the first 5 minutes after this happened? How would you feel? How do you think other people would react? And I'm going to pause. I'll give you a minute just to think about this. So as I mentioned, think about how you feel. Also think about what actions you might take in those first 5 minutes. As I give you a little bit longer to think about this, what would the immediate impact be on Pima? So I was going to say, tell me what you think about as you consider this scenario. Buy as much toilet paper as possible. That's a world we've all been living in recently, isn't it? Okay, wondering if the change is permanent, nervous, concerned that we're under attack, worried, relief. That's interesting. Isolated. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would kind of be par for the course, wouldn't it, the way 2020 is going for us? It's been quite the year all around, hasn't it? And in a way, the experience we've had with the pandemic, while signs of that, of course, were first starting to show up towards the end of December, it only really got to us a month or two later. And of course, we closed and shifted to virtual operations in March. But we've kind of had a little bit of a practice about a very abrupt change. And this is really another example of that. But this is one of the activities that the Futures Institute thinks about when it comes to helping people kind of immerse themselves a little bit in what the future might be like and get out of that kind of regular way of thinking. And these are kind of activities the college is going to be doing increasingly. But I wanted to share one today because as we start thinking about innovation, we have to be starting from the perspective of what the future may look like and being aware that the world is changing very quickly around us. Now, I would make that statement even before there was a pandemic. The pandemic accelerates a lot of those changes. It creates a whole other challenge that we have to worry about. But the reality is the world was changing very quickly on us, even before the pandemic arrived. It used to be the kind of state where progress was kind of S-shaped. You would have a period of stability, you would have a significant change or innovation that occurred, and then you would have another period of stability. And those periods of stability could last 10, 20 years, but that really isn't the case anymore today. It's pretty much every 12 to 18 months, there's something new and something relatively substantial that's changed. And because of the pace at which these changes are coming, it's almost hard to imagine where we might get to in terms of these changes 5, 10 years from now, because we don't know all the different steps and all the different innovations that might happen between now and then. So to hit on some big picture changes, which impact not only us, but many other organizations. And I set these up as sliders, so please go ahead and give some input on these if you consider them significant for Pima or not. One of them, of course, technology changes. This could be artificial intelligence and machine learning, automation, the Internet of Things and others. Cloud would be another example. Globalization, which is a really interesting topic for us now. The world is a much smaller place than it used to be, partly because of technology changes, partly because of the ease of traveling from location to location. But with the impacts of the pandemic, it's almost like we're going slightly backwards in terms of globalization right now because there isn't that travel between different countries. But of course, we will get through this. We have social issues. You just need to turn on the TV, watch the news, some of the events that have occurred this year. And we find ourselves in a very polarized political environment right now, which is likely to be the case for the foreseeable future. Environmental concerns are another factor that has been in some degree wrapped up within politics, but the science has been clear for a while that we are having an impact on the climate of the planet on which we live. And we have the changing nature of work. That's particularly true now when we're all in our respective homes. Some people venturing into offices, but many, many people working virtually now. And the world of work was already changing, but those changes have been accelerated by the pandemic. And there is a real question of what will work look like in the future once we get through this. There are many arguments we could make where we will not return to business as usual. There will be a new normal that settles into effect. And just to give you an example, this is Martech's law. This relates to technology. And this speaks to how technology changes exponentially, very fast. Unfortunately, we've all seen examples of exponential growth lately, again with the pandemic. Organizations tend to react slowly, however. So the rate of change in technology is often much faster than organizations can keep up with. And that essentially creates a particularly interesting challenge for us, because we need to respond as an organization to technology changes, but we also need to be readying our students for the technology that will be in the workplace. So we're kind of impacted a couple different ways by this. So those are big picture things. If we scale back a little bit and talk specifically about higher education, these are some of the trends that stand out when we look at different sources of information about higher education. There is a perceived decrease in the value of a college degree. This is not my opinion. This is a result of surveys that have been carried out by different organizations that indicate that this is a loss in the sense of value of a college degree, in some part driven by the costs of achieving that degree, but also the time that it takes, things like that, to earn a college degree and the readiness of that degree to get people ready to go into the workplace. Growth of online education platforms. Obviously, there are many, Udemy, Coursera, some of the big online higher education institutions as well. Need to reskill workers. I recently took a course on one of these online education platforms because in around about 2015, a new neural network model came out within Python. I wanted to learn how to code in that. So I went and took a class because my skills from my degree are kind of very old now, and I constantly need to remain current in my field, the same way everyone else does in the workforce. There's also potentially the challenge, and I see this one as the lowest scoring across the input from everybody, of balancing the local, national, and international. We are a community college. We serve Pima County. But with the impacts of globalization and technology, geography starts to mean something a little bit different. Offerings at Pima are substantially more accessible to people outside of our immediate community. And in the same way, our competitive landscape has opened up because there are options outside of Pima that other people can go and attend and take classes. And with globalization and the trends there, international becomes much more of an opportunity for different people, even local students looking for other educational opportunities, or for students in other countries seeking an educational opportunity here in the US. And then of course we have the birth dearth, which I spoke about at the recent board meeting, where we have this drop in the fertility rate. Just as an example, this includes data through to 2019, but this is a count of courses offered as MOOCs, so these massive online courses. And you can see from essentially nothing in 2012, we're now at the end of 2019 at around about 11,000. And I didn't include it here, but there have been a number of articles that have come out in the last few months where they've talked about the growth in people signing up for these kinds of classes, probably as people are kind of trapped at home when there was a big period of isolation going on. There's been increased interest in these kinds of courses. And I've mentioned it a couple of times already, but of course there's the minor meta of the pandemic, which changes lots of the rules that we all need to be dealing with. And as I mentioned before, but it's worth repeating, the new normal the world exists in once we get through this pandemic could be substantially different from the normal before the pandemic. And as an education provider, we need to be mindful of that to make sure we are positioning ourselves to be successful in the world, however it looks at the end of all of this. Now, I should note, for all the things that are changing in the world, there are some key things that stay the same. And we need to be really mindful of these things. And again, please respond through Menti and let me know if you agree with these statements being in here. Many students are not college ready. We need to make sure that we have on-ramps for any student seeking an education at Pima. Inequities built within the system hold students back. And we need to make sure that we are providing open access available for any student, regardless of where they're starting from and where they want to get to through their education. Cost is a barrier to education. There is only so much money to go around. And for particularly our low income members of our community, we need to make sure the cost is not a barrier. And for any student who is, for example, working or has other commitments, trying to balance seeking an education with work and family responsibilities can be a huge challenge. And I see from the responses that there's general agreement across these different topics. So as we think about the future of the institution, we need to keep in mind all the things that are changing and how those things might play out, but we have to stay true to our community. We have to remember what our students need and make sure that we're taking these things into account as we think about the future of the college. So I spent a lot of time talking about the future, but with reason. So because of all of this, innovation is key. We live in times of unprecedented change, and it is critically important that we meet the educational needs of the residents within Pima County and that we ready our students for this global society that they will be living in. We also have to recognize that we are in an increasingly competitive market. So we have to make sure that we have offerings that meet the needs of the community and ensure that we have a market, a role, a place. And the pandemic, as mentioned, is changing all of the rules. And so we need to keep that woven in the background of this as well. So it's essentially a very complex problem. We have lots of different things changing on us, and we need to make sure we're ready to respond. So to give you the very dry dictionary definition of innovation, so it's essentially a new idea, method, or device, or the introduction of something new. Now we could talk about this in a variety of different ways. Innovation is actually one of those interesting buzzwords. Kind of everybody seems to have a definition for innovation. But innovation doesn't have to be huge and this immense landslide. It can be small. It can be a new classroom practice by one faculty member that gets us from no students understanding a concept to everyone in the class understanding it through a very creative way of conveying and explaining a topic so that students can engage and understand. But it can also be very big and very substantive, new changes, new platforms. Now, one of the definitions I like from Stephen Shapiro, who's a leading innovator, very simply put, innovation is about staying relevant. We're in a time of unprecedented change. As a result, what may have helped an organization be successful in the past could be potentially the cause of their failure in the future. Companies, or in our case, educational providers, need to adapt and evolve to meet the ever-changing needs of their constituents. And so when we think about innovation at Pima, it's about being creative, understanding our students, understanding what they need to get them to wherever they want to be it transferring to the university, getting into a job, lifelong learning, whatever that might be. And we always have to think about innovation in that context. I should note, our competitors are innovating. All of these things are different things going on with different platforms. So professional certificates developed in partnership with industry leaders. That's actually what I did with one of the online providers earlier in the year. Some of them are establishing guided projects. So the students taking these classes can gain hands-on practical experiences in real-world problems in a relatively short period of time to help with their skills when they're in the workplace to ensure that they have the right skills to be successful. A shift to competency-based education, which again relates to that diminishing value of a college degree. Some institutions are looking at establishing creative ways for students to pay for their education. So income share agreements are one example, where essentially the student borrows money from the institution, but agrees to pay it back through their salary once they complete and have a job. We have these immersive education systems based within virtual reality. And then some institutions have gone so far as establishing their own innovation events to support innovation within their communities. And the bottom line for us really is that maintaining the status quo isn't going to meet the needs of our community. I'm a geophysicist by training. I see this nice little pile of rocks. It would be wonderful if this was our world. But in reality, there's a big earthquake tearing through this beach, and these rocks are wobbling all over the place. And we have to change so we can ensure that the institution remains stable and that we meet what our community needs. And we could also argue the reality of the current status quo, it's not supporting student success today. And so we need to change. So there's a lot going on in this figure, but what you see is our 2-year progress measures from the Voluntary Framework of Accountability, looking at new students who started in fall 2017. The top part of this chart, we're looking at the proportion of those new students who achieved no success in any of their classes in their first term. We want a low number for this. Ideally, this would be 0 because we want all of our students to be successful. The line I've drawn here corresponds to our white population, and you will notice that our Native Indian or Alaska Native, Black or African American, Hawaiian Native or Pacific Islander, and Hispanic students all are seeing higher levels of no success. This is clearly not what we want to see for our community. Now, we could argue that some of this is based on some of their experiences before they got to us, because as we talked about, there are inequities in the system, but we need to own these numbers and think about what we need to do differently to ensure every single student who comes to Pima Community College has an equal opportunity to be successful, and what do we need to do to ensure that's the case for each individual. The lower part shows a 2-year credit success rate. So credit success rate, higher is good. Now we'll see for the white population, it's about 75%, and you can see that line across this chart. But again, you can see for our minority students, they're not seeing the same level of 2-year credit success. And so to me, these data argue that while we have lots of good things that we are doing and we have changed and we are doing, we need to make further changes to make sure we're the community college that our community needs. So we're supporting equity for every student who walks in our door and seeing them be successful. So that's a lot of background. That's kind of painting the big picture. Are there any questions before I hand you over to other speakers?
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Richmond. We really appreciate it.
If there are no questions, I will transition you over to the other speakers. So what's going to happen
Hold
now?
on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay. Hi, this is Maria Garcia. Can you tell me if, where did this data come from? Did you gather this from within our own community?
For the data I showed in the previous chart, yes. So this is,
okay.
We submit to the Voluntary Framework of Accountability, and these are Pima's numbers submitted to that system actually relatively recently. I think these are the ones we submitted this year. But the students—
All right, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Are there other questions?
No, not for me.
Okay, all right.
Nick, those were, could you just clarify, those were students who started in 2017?
Yes, yes. New students for 2017.
Over a 3-year window.
For these students, we track them.
Submitted?
These students we looked at over a 2-year period. So we track them ultimately for 6 years, but for these particular metrics, the no success measure is specifically that first fall in 2017. And then the other metric looks at the total successful credits within their first 2 years. So what I'm going to do now is transition you to the other speakers. I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and we're going to talk about different examples from Pima, some of the really cool things the institution is doing, leveraging innovation as a driver for student access, progress, and success. I want to be really clear. We have examples of innovation across the institution. It occurs in student affairs, it occurs within our operations. The adoption of Menti for this kind of thing is a little tiny example of that too. But what we wanted to focus on for the study session today is those areas that directly impact the academics and the outcomes of our students, since that's the core business area of what the institution does. And so we're going to hear today from Ian Rourke, Laurie Kierstead-Joseph, Michael Amick, and Lamarta Mitchell. And Ian will be up first. I'm going to stop sharing my slides and transition you to Ian. But just so everyone knows, I'm going to keep Menti open and keep some comments available. So if any of you want to submit comments during the course of the rest of the session, please do. And with that, I'll stop sharing my screen and hand you over to Dr. Rourke.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Ian, we hear you now.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure that I am audible. And can you see my PowerPoint and it doesn't cut it off on either of the sides?
We can. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you, Nick. Good afternoon, board, chancellor, friends, colleagues, guests. Love this topic. I thought that was an excellent presentation from Dr. Richmond. And this is really same song, second verse, but localized to workforce development initiatives is what we were asked to share. I didn't title it with workforce development because we wanted to look at these initiatives today, not only through the lens of being workforce development, but really how each and every single one of them speaks to the challenges that Dr. Richmond pointed out with respect to being a prototype for the future model of education. The reason why workforce development often serves as an incubator for many innovative and new ways of looking at things is because workforce development has to work at the pace of business and keep pace with business. And oftentimes business and industry is moving extraordinarily fast, especially with the advent of the technologies that Dr. Richmond highlighted in her opening presentation. Similar to the Shapiro quote, a very famous quote from Jack Welch, that if the rate of change on the outside of the organization exceeds the rate of change on the inside, the end is near. Very famous Rembrandt painting. Of course, won't go into the story, the legend, and all of it behind it, but basically the Babylonian Empire was riding high, was at the top of the world, and really didn't realize the growing threat until the Persians and the Medes were at the gate. And in our day, the rise and fall of Babylonian Empire could be characterized as Blockbuster versus Netflix. And what's interesting is that with the rise of Netflix, and many of us used to do the old model of Netflix, Blockbuster had multiple opportunities to recognize the threat, to capitalize upon it, and even at one point in time, purchase it, but chose not to. It was a popular model. It was a centerpiece of my weekend and many others growing up to go to the Blockbuster store,
Yeah.
the video. But at the end of the day, we are all massive consumers of the streaming model that was now pioneered and then brought to its full height by Netflix and continues to grow. So the story is that it wasn't an event, it was a process by which the innovation eroded away the old model and ultimately replaced and created a new one. We have many of those providers that Nick talked about in our world, in higher education, workforce development, and training, that are doing very unique and innovative things. And we are also. We have talked about the Applied Technology Academy before, which we co-developed with Caterpillar, an industry partner, where we took engineers who did not have the hands-on understanding of the designing that they were doing and the cost to having to do that rework down the road whenever technicians were telling the engineers, what you designed isn't working in the real world. Let's show you how it works in the real world. What the Applied Technology Academy showed in terms of innovation is that one and done is done, meaning that lifelong learning is now a must in the reality of this new world in which we live and in which we work. Dr. Richmond, who I think is one of the most intelligent people I've ever met, talked about how she had to go back and get some more training because her degree was earned back. And so all of us know that as professionals, where we value professional development, and we do at this organization tremendously, which we're very blessed and privileged. But we can be there for our community to continue to provide that lifelong learning that they need in order to remain viable in tomorrow's workplace with all of these challenges that are coming. It also demonstrated that we can develop our own quality non-credit regimen and that it will be noticed. It will be noticed nationally, locally, and regionally, and other employers will come on board with it. And finally, it's a proof of concept right now for policy development, for the proposal that similar training should count towards FTSE for non-credit. So we are very honored to be in the conversations with policy developers in preparation for the upcoming session on how this would look across the state of Arizona. And it was this academy that engendered those conversations. Too simple?
Ian, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you just explain that a little bit more in depth? So particularly around the policy and sort of what you sort of see coming out of.
Sure. So in our state, I know that Dr. B is on the call, so he can bail me out if I mangle the exact policy. But in our state, state level funding, when it was there for all 10 college districts, was predicated on two large categories. So in the Arizona Revised Statutes, it classifies credit and it classifies non-credit. And in the ARS, it stipulates that all funding will only go to credit. So we do not tabulate any FTSE or reporting for any non-credit modality, only for clock hour and for credit modalities in the state. So adult ed actually has a measure of FTSE because it is a clock hour program. However, that is not necessarily the case in these 50 states. So there are actually states that dollar for dollar fund non-credit workforce training at the same rate. Now, we do not receive state funding, but what FTSE would do for Pima in this case is that would count into our expenditure limit calculations, which would be, as we know, a benefit for the organization. Does any other questions on that, Board Chair?
No, thank you very much for clarification.
No, absolutely, glad to help. So this was very exciting, and still so very proud of all of the deans who were involved, and also Missy Blair, who runs our Center for Transportation Training, for Pima Community College to launch the first autonomous vehicle driver and operations specialist program in the country. And it'd be very easy and very tempting to look at this as a one-off, as a niche model. But really what it did was it really taught us a lot of things. It validated that our chancellor, that many of us who have been studying the impact of Industry 4.0 were spot on, that Industry 4.0 wasn't coming down the road, pun intended. Industry 4.0 was already here. And when Too Simple contacted us, they made us very aware that these jobs are not going to fall into the very specific and departmental categories in which we've organized the college. We had to have individuals from IT, from automotive technology, from truck driver training, and from logistics all in the same room, which would be the technical version of a liberal arts program where lots of different elements are added in. That is the blending and occupational blurring and the hybrid jobs that we already see happening in the marketplace. And this was our ability to stand up a program to meet that challenge. It also validated that partnerships and networks really go beyond just the initial program that you co-develop. Pima Community College has now been mentioned, this program has been mentioned at site selectors meetings. Site selectors are those individuals that work with institutions such as Sun Corridor Inc. to bring business and industry opportunities to Tucson to bring our students those new and better jobs. And because Pima Community College responded with the foresight, not just responding, but planning ahead, this program has literally brought other business and industry partners to the table through Sun Corridor to consider Tucson as a place in which they want to either expand or relocate their business. The Google IT Professional Support Certificate, still relatively new for us. We launched this in May. As you are aware, Pima led the statewide implementation of this professional support certificate program. We were planning for it before the pandemic, and really the pandemic validated, as Nick indicated, the pandemic really validated a lot of the things that were happening in our space, and this was one of those. The implications of the Google CERT project were these. There's a lot of them. We learned a lot of lessons. Statewide coordination is incredibly important. We 10 community colleges are better together. And when we meet these challenges together, we do more for each of our students in our own individual districts and municipalities. It's also validated that non-credit and prior learning assessment could play out for a benefit in the real world. All of the colleges who have implemented the Google IT Professional Support Certificate Program in a non-credit format are issuing prior learning assessment, including Pima Community College, into our IT and cybersecurity degrees. With wholly online, Dr. Richmond mentioned competency-based. This program was wholly competency-based. At Pima, we provided virtual support with a faculty member as well as virtual support through student affairs due to it being offered through our D2L platform. Thank you to my peers for helping us out with that. Universality of this. We knew we were targeting working learners, adults who had been displaced by the pandemic, who needed this training to really get into a new career in IT quickly. What we also learned is that we had high school students that enrolled in this program and were successful completers. And we also finally learned that there were adults who did not yet have their high school equivalency, adult education, high school equivalency seeking students who also enrolled in this program and are being successful in it. So it really met the needs of multiple learners. And it was the validation of and the popularity and the need for short-term reskilling, especially in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis and economic downturn. We've been working on prior learning assessment now for just at 4 years. And it too is a process, not an event. And we are getting better and better at it with each and every year. This comes from our marketing campaign for our original launch of prior learning assessment. And I'm so proud of what these visuals represent, because it represents these. Prior learning assessment is one of those that's not as flashy necessarily. Nick was talking about that an innovation doesn't always have to be out in front. This is really a lot of tedious backroom processes with our IT systems, with our processes for student affairs, with our processes for ensuring the validity of learning that was taking place outside of our classrooms and outside of our college. But at the end of the day, what prior learning assessment does for our students is it serves as a true competency-based model and moves the needle toward a competency-based world. It democratizes access for all learners, particularly adult learners. And it also redefines the locus of learning. As educators, we always strive to be student-centered in everything that we do. What's amazing and why I really love working with prior learning assessment paradigms is it truly does put the student at the center of the equation. And it is really about recognizing and validating the unique skills and learning that our students already bring to us when they come to our organization. There's some other examples. As you're aware, Pima is working both in registered and competency-based apprenticeship models. The innovative one is the competency-based apprenticeship model, where through prior learning assessment, learning that occurs in the workplace through teaching and doing the job can be measured and credited back to parts of a degree within the confines of our policy and operations. Equally, with the TRAIN initiative, the Living Lab is providing work-based learning opportunities for our students here at Pima Community College once the Living Lab paradigm moves forward, and in case there are not jobs or apprenticeship opportunities available for them in the community. And finally, tuition reimbursement assistance is a way we can work with local companies. Geico is one of our primary partners in this initiative right now to serve not only our local talent, but also extend that enrollment opportunity to help with our expenditure limit situation and bring more people to the talent pool of Pima County. Tuition reimbursement is where we work with employers to not only refine and ease the processes for their tuition reimbursement, but literally help employers hire at the front end on their on their entry-level jobs, and then grow their talent from within the company, which increases both student retention in the program and retention at the company.
Ian, I have a quick question.
Yes.
How many companies are we working with at any one time or throughout the college system in innovating new types of partnerships at any one time?
So innovating new pipe, I'd have to go back in a lot. We just had the opportunity. It's going to be moving forward. We were for Opportunity America. They reached out to Chancellor Lambert workforce team spent many hours working to respond to a pilot version of an employer engagement survey that's going to go out nationally through Opportunity America. They came to us because they've heard about our workforce development and employer partnerships and wanted to work on the survey. So we went through it and helped them refine the model, and the national model is going to come out sometime in November. But what we learned was documented. So we know that there are more engagements occurring outside of what we were able to document. But through the workforce development team, through advisory committees and the programs of study, and through our foundation, we were able to document nearly 700 active employer partnerships in the last fiscal year. That's a phenomenal amount of engagement, and we stratified them based on transactional all the way up to very deep partnerships that led to tuition reimbursement assistance or internships, or even the giving like we've just seen recently from the Brown Foundation. We are going to add to that survey to include our workforce development partners, our community-based organizations, and other people who help us out in the workforce development ecosystem.
And could you just give us a sense of sort of how, you know, when either the college through a board that someone is sitting on, or the employer directly approaching us, or us reaching out to an employer who's thinking about or located here in Southern Arizona, could you just tell us a little bit about the process that you go through in terms of exploring a partnership? What are the college resources that are invested into the cultivation of these different types of relationships? And then sort of when does it actually mature to a point where it becomes sort of an official project and then make its way to us?
Right, so it happens many different ways. And what the Advisory Committee Reform Initiative that we presented on and implemented 3 years ago, I think it was really about what I called teaching the college how to do business with business. It's great that the workforce development team knows how to do that. That's what we're supposed to do and do well on a daily basis. If we don't, people on this call hear about it pretty quickly. And so the expectation is that we perform, and we perform consistently. But it doesn't do the college any good if there's only one business unit that knows how to operate consistently with business and industry well. So we reposition the advisory committees from being a check the box because we have to because of Perkins funding, to how our programs of study empower themselves to build and develop those relationships with their business partners. Engagement has to happen at many different levels. And so when we have the program of study engaging the HR folks or the shop manager at that level, we have the chancellor serving on national boards, we have David Del Rey and myself serving on state and regional boards. All of that leads to a deepening of the partnership at all levels so that there is more continuity with the business partner. Some of them come very out of left field, and we have to be prepared. Too simple, we weren't expecting that phone call. But we didn't, what we didn't do was say, we'll think about it. The minute they started talking about what they wanted to do, it was, that's an opportunity. We need to jump on it, and we'll figure out the rest of it afterwards. But if we had been pensive about it, we would have lost that opportunity.
So Damian, let me build on that. Just use a couple of examples, right? I'm in San Francisco. The board's in San Francisco. I'm on the board of CCWC. Google is there. I approach them and say, well, we'd love to be able to do this, but do it from a state perspective. Next thing you know, we're on a phone call, and look, voila, a few months later, we're doing Google. I'm at my NC3 board meeting. Chrysler's talking about wanting to scale up Chrysler programs across the country. I say to them, we'd love to do that here. So we started doing a Chrysler program. And by the way, we were the only one of the colleges who took the Chrysler piece and put it into the high schools. So these things take a lot of different forms, but one thing is clear: if you're not at the table, you're going to miss out on a lot of opportunities, and you have to be at the table nationally, state, regionally, and locally.
And Lee, would you say it's fair to characterize, at least the senior leadership at the college, and what I'm hearing from Ian, is that it's actually happening sort of at all levels, but that there's really an intentionality in the senior leadership.
Yes, yes.
At a national, local, state level, on boards, to really look for ways to enhance the service of the institution to the community.
Absolutely. This is by design. Now, there's not a one size fit all approach, but we are consciously looking at developing, cultivating relationships at multiple levels. And as Ian can tell you, sometimes you don't need me to be there because our brand speaks for itself. But there are other times I have to be there. And the Brown Foundation is an example of that, right? So there's no one size fits all. But the key is we're engaged. We're highly engaged. And we have really built a great brand, again, nationally, statewide, regionally, and locally.
And I mean, I would recognize too that we have board members who are also engaged in this type of work, who are bringing forward sort of conceptual partnerships, finding, I could think of opportunities that, and people that I've met in the community, and we've
absolutely
connected to leadership. But, in terms of the board's functioning within this space, what is the best practice that you see in order to help move the needle? Sort of when opportunities present themselves, what is the best strategy for,
I think, when the board is high flying, the board introduces the people they know to the chancellor or the CEO. I think that's the one of the most important connections that can be made. And I know some of you have done a really good job of doing that here locally. And then we take it from here. I hand it off to someone who can then take that to the next level, et cetera. But it's all of us working in concert. And it's not just working with business and industry, but it's also working with lawmakers, whether it's in Washington, D.C., whether it's here in the state or locally. And many of you have also helped to cultivate those pieces because those are important, especially as we talk about grants and other resources that we need. And as you're probably seeing, we're helping to shape some of the things that come out of Washington, D.C. Folks probably don't realize that always, that we're asked to give a quote, we're asked to give our perspective on legislation. And so, again, that's another example of the board going back to Washington, D.C. every year makes a big difference. It may not seem like it, but it does. It makes a huge difference when you go there. So I think when we're all engaged from the top to the bottom, this is what you start to see from a college.
And I would just sort of commend the cultural change because, I certainly see it from within our departments. I think about our fashion design program that has done sort of amazing different types of innovative work, partnering either with industry leaders or rising to the occasion during the COVID crisis to make, to start to actually make PPE equipment for health providers. So, and I'm sorry to get a little off topic, but I see it throughout the institution, and it really seems very intentional. So I just wanted to better understand how we were cultivating that intentionality. Ian, if you want.
But I will say this, Damian, it all starts with we see a problem or we see a gap, we see an opportunity. So we don't look at it as a negative. We see it as now we recognize we still got a lot of work to do internally. We've got to do better by closing gaps for our students so more of them are enjoying these opportunities. And, you'll see, and Nick will talk about this later, our completion rates are not bad comparatively speaking to others, but we still have room to grow there. You saw some of the numbers in terms of getting our success rates to be on par across racial and ethnic categories. We still got a lot of work there, but this is the work that a lot of our colleges and universities are continuing to have to do and work through.
Any other questions? And with that, I think, is it Michael who's next?
So I do have one more question, Ian. I'm sorry. Is there, are we looking at ways to be able to measure the value of these partnerships, both to the college and to the broader community, whether it's, sort of the intangible, there's sort of intangible value, but then there's also a market value, like if we know that a partnership with Too Simple is going to result in X amount of jobs and we can apply, economic impact study to it. Are we collecting that data to be able to begin to do that?
Yeah, well, we weren't, and we had just been busy doing all of it. But that's what was interesting about this survey was when the survey came to us, we looked at it. We were already planning on, and I see Raj is on the call. Thank you to Dr. Murthy and his team because of the Salesforce implementation. We are working with their team to build out the employer engagement side of the Salesforce implementation. But when the survey came in last month, we saw an opportunity to really take that framework that Opportunity America was building and then actually measure in they had 3, but we're going to come up with 4 different categories of engagement with business and industry. And then when we implement it through Salesforce, we'll be able to heat map all of those connections and the return on investment and at the end of the day in terms of student performance and results and opportunities in the business, in the labor market. So that survey was really a great opportunity for us to get baseline data about these engagements, and we have a lot of it now. And so we're going to be building off of that survey.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from any of the board members? Mr. Hanna? Nothing?
Great. With that, I turned it, I believe it's Michael. Michael, are you next?
It's actually Laurie next.
Laurie, my apologies.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Thanks to Nick and Chancellor and the board. Thank you for having me here to present today. I am going to go and pull up my slides. All right. Can you see my slides? Okay, perfect. So, hi everybody. I'm not sure I even know everybody. I'm Lori Kierstead Joseph, and I am the acting Vice President of Adult Basic Education for College and Career, the Division of Adult Basic Ed here at Pima. And our Adult Ed division serves more than 4,300 students. Actually, we served more than 4,300 students last year in Adult Basic Ed, in English as a second language, we call it ELA, in high school equivalency preparation, math bridge classes, refugee education. We have a jail program, we have a citizenship program, and then of course we have our IBEST, or Integrated Basic Education and Skills Programming. The National Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, or WIOA, that challenges adult ed programs like ours to help all adult learners get the skills they need to succeed in college and career. So to that end, all of our classes in Adult Basic Ed or at our college not only include the basic skills that will help adult learners succeed they all include the skills that they need for college and career. So we integrate career exploration, workforce preparation into all levels of our Adult Basic Ed programming. So, and while Adult Ed has lots of innovative things happening, today I'm just going to talk about one of them. I'm going to share with you about our IBEST program, and it feels really timely this week. I'm excited to be here this particular week to talk about it. So IBEST is a career pathways model that meets the WIOA definition of integrated education and training. IETs is what we call them. So IBEST is an IET, and it has to include these 3 components, right? So we have adult ed and literacy, or our basic education, workforce preparation, which includes things like critical thinking skills, digital literacy skills, and self-management skills, as well as competencies like utilizing resources, understanding systems, and working with others. And then of course, the workforce training piece is the career tech ed that Ian and his team do. IBEST exemplifies the type of partnership that's written into the WIOA law, and it engages all of the WIOA partners and more. So Adult Basic Ed is provided by us at Pima. We work closely with our one-stop partners to integrate some of this workforce preparation, and then we work with our workforce partners at the college in CTE. So this is why we do IBEST. The IBEST model comes to us out of Washington State. We didn't invent it, we didn't create it, but we reached for it because the model, the integration of basic skills and career and technical content has been proven to accelerate the acquisition of both those basic skills and the career technical ed skills and increase certificate completion rates. So the research out of Washington State that got our attention showed that IBEST students were 3 times more likely to earn college credit and 9 times more likely to complete a credential than their non-IBEST counterparts. So, so let me show you how it works and what it looks like. So IBEST accelerates the completion of multiple goals by moving from this first then model to a concurrent and contextualized model of learning. Instead of telling students they need to build their basic skills before they can study in the career that they want, they begin as a CTE student right away. It's important to note that while this slide demonstrates how learners move toward the completion of their HSC by passing the GED test, while also getting the CTE cert at the same time, this model is good for not just GED seekers, but for students who may already have a diploma, but who have some basic skills deficiencies as well, or for second language learners or ESL students seeking to accelerate their timeline toward a certificate. All basic skills learning is contextualized to the CTE field, which is what accelerates the learning of both the basic skills and the CTE skills. IBEST is a sustaining innovation that challenges the orthodoxy of higher education, of who is college ready and of who can succeed in college classes. This model is really about equity and access. With this model, PCC can serve more students, meet them where they are, wherever their skills are, and get them to completion and to call into career faster. As Pima looks at how to serve our community, this model makes CTE training available to, for example, the 70,000 adults in Pima County who don't have a high school diploma, or the 57,000 adults in Pima County who report that they speak English less than very well. So we'll need to strengthen those English skills while they're working to upskill, or the students who have applied to Pima but have tested into maybe a developmental class. So here's what the model looks like. Let me talk through this slide a little bit. We've been doing IBEST at Pima for a while now. We've done them in these 6 career fields. The 3 at the bottom are the 3 that we're running right now. And each IBEST has its unique qualities and career training elements, but they all have the elements listed here on the side in common. They are team taught by a pair of adult educators and a team of CTE faculty. And enrolled students might be GED seekers and maybe high school graduates who need the additional supports of IBEST. Each year is roughly, each IBEST is roughly 1 year long. Since the training is offered at the post-secondary level, and because students must also achieve the GED or the high school equivalency in that time, we found that 1 year is kind of a sweet spot. So all of them are about a year long, give or take. But in that year, we can take somebody who comes in with roughly 8th grade skills and get them to the GED and the career certificate all at the same time. Due to very strong relationships around our college and with our one-stop partners, we ensure the wraparound supports that students need, including leveraging WIOA Title I dollars, those one-stop training dollars, adult ed and college funds, and federal financial aid for both traditional students and for those who are seeking their high school equivalency. We leverage the ability to benefit provision that allows our learners to get financial aid even if they don't yet have a high school diploma. So that ATB eligible is about open to ability to benefit. Often our students will use Title I funding to cover tuition costs for the first 6 credits and then shift over to ATB for the remainder of the certificate. I have to say we couldn't do IBEST without the great CTE programs here at Pima that are aligned to local industry needs and with strong local employability. We couldn't do it without them, right? We just sort of wrap around and integrate into those great programs. And we couldn't do IBEST without the support that we've had in recent years from Pima Online. I have to say that just like the rest of the college, our IBEST programs had to pivot to fully virtual or online learning during the pandemic. Thankfully, we were already doing a lot of hybrid learning and we're already integrated into D2L, so we were able to make the move quickly. I'll tell you, when I talked to program directors in adult ed around the country, they were not all as lucky and not all as ready. So that innovation of being ready with a strong online component really helped us make the pivot possible, which is good because IBEST teachers and staff were all there to support our learners as they navigated that transition of their CT classes to online as well. So I want to tell you just a little bit, we find student story really helps bring it home. So let me tell you about who IBEST is for. I've mentioned that it could be for someone who's seeking their high school diploma, might be for someone who already has a diploma but needs to upskill, could even be something for employees who are working in the field but need to upskill as well and need that additional support. So I'm going to read a couple of really brief stories. You may have heard one of them, but I bet you haven't heard all of these before. So let me tell you about Victoria first. She's on the left. Victoria started in AIT IBEST when she started in IBEST, she was struggling to make ends meet and was housing insecure. She decided that she needed a high school diploma to get ahead, so that's why she reached out to Pima's adult ed program. And in her math class, she learned about the IBEST in AIT. She thought it might be a good fit since childhood. She had loved working on cars and repaired all sorts of mechanical instruments. So she had a natural aptitude toward this. And in her first semester earned straight A's and passed all of her GED tests in her first semester. During the second semester, she had to take on a second job because of these financial challenges she was struggling with, and she had less time to devote to her studies, and her grades kind of suffered a little bit, but with the support of the wraparound services in IBEST and frankly her cohort of classmates, she persisted, she passed. Last December, she completed the certificate, earning the level 1 cert in AIT. She received multiple job offers. She ended up accepting only a part-time position because she's continuing her studies at Pima and didn't want work to get in the way of that. Her goal is to become an engineer. In the middle is Jason. He was on his own since 16 and finished high school online, but didn't feel ready for college level work. So his adult ed teacher helped connect him once he was in adult ed with AIT IBEST and encouraged him to apply. In the IBEST program, there was a real transformation in Jason. He's a hard worker, and he came in with that characteristic. But when he began, he really didn't have any confidence in his academic skills or in speaking up in class. Learning math in hands-on program like this has helped him learn the math. And he said the numbers and equations sort of came alive for him. Being in a supportive cohort environment led him to ask more questions, stay with a topic until he understood. He didn't miss a single day of class and earned A's in all of his courses. He obtained a paid internship at the end in a manufacturing plant and is also continuing on to study for the advanced certificate. And then finally, in the middle of the right-hand picture, the middle is Torre from Ivory Coast, West Africa. He participated in AIT IBEST with Victoria and Jason. With the help of the IBEST team, he was able to secure an internship with Roche that he completed this past summer. Upon completion of his internship, he was hired for a 1-year contract to work for Roche, where he will be working as a technician contracted through Tailored Management, where he'll be running tests on the instruments used to diagnose cancer and ensure that the machines are running smoothly as needed. He's working with the electrical and pneumatic systems that he studied while in AIT, as well as the cylinders and tools that he was introduced to in the program. Torre will be making $18 an hour just 8 months after completing his level 1 certificate at AIT. He is also continuing his education at Pima, working toward an associate's in engineering. So these are some of the stories that tell you why we do this work. It helps these learners get to the finish line and into the job, into a career faster. But here's a little bit of data to back that up. Last year we had 78 students in IBEST, and the year before there were 90. It was down a little bit actually because we had to delay the start of the MA IBEST due to the pandemic. But the percent of IBEST students who complete the certificate in that 1 year stays high. It averages around 75, sometimes even higher. When the collaboration is strong, it's even better, right? So we ran BHS IBEST 3 times, and the completion rates went from 71% to 76 to 82%. So when it's a strong, developed collaboration, it can be really, really strong. Helping learners get employed in a career that is in demand locally is the primary goal, really, of IBEST. And many adult learners need careers. I mean, all adult learners need careers with family-sustaining wages. Many of them need them urgently. So 80% of our IBEST grads gained employment in the first year after being in the program. About 50% were in sector. Depending on the career sector, they might not always start right in sector. I can tell you though that IBEST is not a dead end. You saw that with our student stories today. In the 2 most recent IBEST cohorts, 57% of the learners continued on to the next level certificate. And actually 36% of the current AIT cohort are already employed in sector, even though they're still in the middle of the cert. One last thing about outcomes, industry recognized credentials are an important way that our learners can demonstrate the competencies that they've mastered during their CTE training. And because of the great work of our CTE programs that they've done to integrate these into our programs, our learners are stacking them up while they're in IBEST and collecting these IRCs that are really valuable. So I'm going to shift gears just briefly now and tell you, this is something the Chancellor mentioned at the start of this, and so I wanted to make sure you all heard about this. So these are the ways that our program has innovated. So wait, let me back up. So while we did not originate the IBEST model, as I said, we did innovate on the model. We did adjust it to make it fit our local context and the needs of our local learners and our local community. So I'm proud to share that our IBEST program has been selected for the Advancing Innovation in Adult Ed project. It's a 5-year project funded by OCTAE to identify and highlight innovative practices. And we are one of just 4 programs nationally that have been selected in round 1 of this project. As I said, we didn't start IBEST, but these are the ways that we have innovated it. So the integration of the GED or the high school equivalency diploma is one way that we have innovated it based on top of what Washington was already doing. There's also a new pathway for high school equivalency coming that we'll be integrating called the high school equivalency plus career ready, which is what HSE plus CR is. And it's sort of a portfolio multiple measures pathway to the HSE that's a great fit for IBEST. We braid funding, leveraging ability to benefit, leveraging Title II dollars, Title I dollars, both from WIOA, college dollars, and financial aid to make this possible. The way that we team and collaborate with our internal to the college and external to the college partners for extensive wraparound services is why they tell us that we were selected to be recognized. So I'm just going to wrap up by telling all of you that our IBEST program will be showcased in these 2 upcoming events. First, tomorrow, we will join 3 other teams that were selected and showcase what our models look like on a showcase webinar. And then on October 8th, we will host a virtual site visit, taking a deeper dive into the collaboration and our model. We're going to hear from students and teachers and collaborators about what makes students successful in this model. And Assistant Secretary Scott Stump from OCTAE will be joining us. I have to say that even hosting a virtual site visit is an innovation, right? And we couldn't do a face-to-face one, and we said, well, let's do it virtually. And so here we are. So I invite all of you to watch and listen into these events. And so that's our IBEST model. Questions?
So Chair Klinko, I have some comments.
Yes, Mr. Hanna.
All right, thank you. So I just don't think that we talk about adult education enough in our daily operations. It is, many of you probably know that adult education actually predates the foundation of our college in terms of program. And if we are to really strive towards the Achieve 60 goal, adult education is one of those places that we can really move the needle, because you're taking folks who are upskilling, who may not have their high school education, getting that diploma, moving on to college. So it really changes lives in our community. So, and I've also been told that if our GED HSE program was its own high school, we'd be the largest high school in the county by far. This whole part of our college is just a part that we just don't talk about enough, and such an important part to both the college and our community. I also just want to mention, though, so first of all, congratulations, Lori, to you and your whole team on this unbelievable award, and hopefully moving on to the next round. And I just want to make people aware that Lori and Regina before her not only advocate for adult education on a local level, on a state level, but they do it on a national level. So Pima Community College is out there in the vanguard of adult education, showing that this is how it can be done successfully, and making that known to people all the way from our local legislators to our state legislators, and in the Capitol building. People know that Pima Community College is really at the forefront of adult education. So I just want to make sure that we recognize Lori and her entire team for what they do. So
Thank you, Mark. We have a great team.
Any other comments? Okay. Thank you very much, Lori. Again, I echo Mark's comments. We really appreciate the incredible work that you do. how transformational it is to individuals' lives. Thank you. Okay, next up we have Chancellor Lambert is the next item on the agenda is Pima Online. With Michael Amick?
Yes.
Okay. Is that correct? I don't want to take us out of order, but I believe that on the list you are next.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm thankful to be able to present with you this evening. My name is Michael Amick. I'm the Vice President of Distance Education for Pima Online. And thank you again for having me as part of this presentation. I'd just like to start off by mentioning that Pima Online as an entity is an innovation itself. We frequently have guests that come visit Pima Online, and we take them through the entire structure. And it is an innovative implementation as a structure. It is why I was willing to move across the country with my family to come participate in it. And it has a dedicated faculty leadership that are experts in online learning. It has an instructional design unit that is creating award-winning and high-quality online learning courses for students and faculty. The learning management system, D2L, which is often placed under IT at many institutions, is actually housed under online learning. It has dedicated e-learning librarians that help serve students that are dedicated to working in the online learning space. It has now a director of online student success that is seeking to ensure that students are doing just as well as they would be in their face-to-face courses. And so that's just some of the structure that's under Pima Online as an innovative implementation at our institution that has been really defining processes to ensure that students and faculty are having the highest quality learning and teaching experience they can in the online environment. I've been involved with online learning for 23 years. And what I've seen is related to the statement here by Gary Miller that what once was a disruptive change being introduced to higher ed is now at the center of being able to respond to the diverse societal changes of the maturing information revolution. And that was never more abundantly clear to me as how online learning is at the center of disruptive changes as when COVID hit. And even I never thought I would see the day where we were asked to put an entire institution completely online in 14 days. But because of what we reviewed in our after action review that Tom Davis asked us all to participate in, we clearly saw that the work that we had done over the past few years paid off huge for us. Just one example is automatically creating a desire to learn course shell for every course offering was not practiced until just a few years ago. And just having that one item in place saved so much work for everybody involved. And we had countless examples of that. So I could go into great detail about the innovations that Pima Online is participating in. But what I'd like to do is the state of online learning is in a constant mode of innovation, and we're constantly looking at the horizon and looking at how to implement innovations as they become available in online learning. One of the things that Chancellor Lee Lambert points to frequently is the 4 superpowers. The 4 superpowers are entities coming at the future of work, the future of skills, and are going to be disrupting higher education and really disrupting across all sectors of employment and how we do business. And so for your awareness, I want to talk through those four. And I have highlighted here some examples of how we're implementing them in online learning and some of the potentials of how they may be implemented. And so the first superpower is the cloud. And the cloud just acknowledges that all of the computer processes that you're doing and participating in are not housed on your computer or even at a server at Pima Community College. And one of the biggest examples we have of this currently is our D12 Brightspace implementation is driven by AWS. D2L has proven to be a partner that is also focused on innovation. They are a global company out of Canada that is also publishing white papers on the future of work and future skills. Dr. Ian Rourke and I are participants on their steering committee about the future of skills and how they are working to change D12 Brightspace to be an environment that instead of focusing on courses and credits and degree programs, it instead wants to focus on skill attainment and how that can be expressed to employers. And so one of the things about the ability for D12 to be in the cloud is that it is beyond 99.99% reliable. It is there for the students, it is there for the faculty when they need to utilize it. For the past every other year, Pima Online has issued a national survey called the Priority Survey of Online Learners. And we issue that every other spring to every student that is taking an online course. They have the capability to tell us what is important to them in their online experience and how satisfied or unsatisfied they are with each one of those items. In all three of the surveys that we have conducted, they are asked how important is it to them that the learning environment online is reliable. And that has been rated as the #1 item of importance to the online students. And amazingly, it has also been ranked as the item that they are most satisfied with out of about the 40 items they give feedback on. And so it just is quite a testament that we seek to establish not only in partnership with the D12 Brightspace as an application, but all of our local services that support it and support students and faculty, the satisfaction rate. I won't be able to go into detail onto all of these items, but just want to mention them briefly. One of the horizon items is blockchain. And although I recently earned a certificate in LinkedIn Learning about blockchain, it taught me nothing about how to construct a database. It was just trying to teach me on what is blockchain. And the way that blockchain functions is that information and data is put on lots of different computer servers in the cloud that can be verified. And so it becomes very reliable information, objectively reliable information. How that can impact higher education is that blockchain seeks to disrupt items by eliminating gatekeepers and empowering people with information. How that impacts higher ed is that instead of a student having to go to the registrar's office and get permission to get an official transcript that it can share with somebody, the credential that they've earned can be placed on the blockchain. And that then it eliminates the capability of having to have the institution verify that. And ODM is an item that we're seeking to pilot with, and Ian Rourke is leading that pilot, so that now not only is that credential verified as being legitimate, ODM then exposes that to employers, and they can look for the skills or credentials that they need and be more direct in connecting with a student to get them employed. Learning Tools Interoperability Advantage allows faculty to easily implement and plug in new and innovative technologies that they want to use in a course. And H5P is using interactive learning tools and online learning that are open education resource developed. So instead of the focus on a textbook being open education resource, we're now seeing the actual program interactive cool technology learning pieces that can go into a course be developed OER. The second superpower to talk about is the Internet of Things. And most commonly, we hear about this in virtual reality, augmented reality, XR. A lot of this is still on the horizon, but it is really starting to show up. We've had an online department head in biology utilize Labster to bring in virtual reality. And all of Allied Health under what was Joe Gau's leadership is exploring how to bring in and implement virtual reality or augmented reality items to learning. Maybe a little bit before we get to all of the XR related items, we're trying to bring in the innovative use of video into online learning. And one of them that we have inside of Desire to Learn already is the video assignment tool. How this is innovative is it allows the instructor to not just issue a video, but the video can be paused and interactions can take place with the student giving a responsive video at a specific mark, answering questions at a specific mark that then is transported into the grades tool. Something similar with the PlayPosit interactive video platform tool that we have is an instructor can take a video from YouTube and then bring it into PlayPosit and mark at certain places comments that they want to make about that video so that it's clear to the student, questions that they want to ask the student as they watch that video. So just making the use of video more relevant to the learning that a faculty person wants to bring across to a student. The third superpower to talk about is mobile, how critical and important it is for information and processes to be utilized on a mobile device, including the learning process. And so one of the things that we emphasize is that D2L is device responsive. It is functional on any device that a student has because of that. And the college itself has broadened its divisive responsiveness. I know that we've seen demos recently about how financial aid can take place on a mobile device. And we've seen how during this COVID environment, student services has implemented their responsive mode of notifying a student when they are ready to receive help from student services. Another app that you might have seen featured is the D2L Pulse app. And all of this, of why it's so critical, the objective with mobile usage is that the user, students, can do the activity that they need to when they are able to, wherever they happen to be. It also allows the information that the user, in this case the student, finds them when they need it. And so we're able to issue global announcements on the Pulse app about things that are happening at the college, and the student receives a notification on their device. But it's also related to engagement of their learning. And so when a faculty person posts an announcement for their course, they receive that notification on their device. And that's so critical that it changes the engagement profile. Instead of the student needing to go to a computer, log in, click to their class, and see if there's anything there, they are notified in a timely way when they need it, including when a grade is issued for an assignment. They receive a notification, the student can swipe at that time to see what their grade is, and it can roll them right into the course, and they can continue their coursework from their device. The last item of superpower is artificial intelligence. There's a lot going on in this area, and the potential for more is coming at us fast. Where we're exploring it in D2L is how to know if a student needs help. That there are items of machine learning implemented in the student success system saying, hey, this student hasn't logged in. Or based on behavior that we've seen in past semesters, students that don't log in receive a C and don't do this discussion post very well, you should reach out to them right away and become proactive in how you help them. We're also doing that type of interface and integration with Starfish so that D2L can be part of that proactive work that Student Services is doing with Starfish for students. We're also looking at a new item that uses AI Packback, where it starts to help answer and give feedback on discussion posts, alleviating some of the burden for faculty. Still on the horizon is virtual teaching assistants like Alexa that may be able to help students and faculty. One item we do want to monitor very closely with AI is it's also now being identified as one of the highest risk areas for inequities. AI is giving the bulk of its analysis that are out of sync with racial aspects, and we want to take care that items that we implement with artificial intelligence do not further exacerbate any racial inequities or other types of inequities that we have as a society. We have a lot of community innovations that we could go into for each one of these, but what we're starting to experience is that online learning is not a place where students come to, but it arcs now across the college in helping us deliver all aspects of what we're doing. So we're assisting James in dual enrollment to have part of what we do in dual enrollment be online. This summer, in the COVID environment, we partnered with Upward Bound to help them deliver that in an online environment. And on the horizon for us, we're exploring with Tony Offrit, the Director of Prison Education, how we can deliver online learning by an application called JPay to expand education in the prison systems, which is so critical because it is the #1 way, education is the #1 way to prevent recidivism in the prison environments. The last innovative item I want to share with you that online learning is participating in is the Pearson partnership. This has been an opportunity for us to bring in out-of-state students online. It's something I have heard infinitely about online learning is we can get students from everywhere. We can get students from out of state. And unless there's an intentional strategy and mechanism for doing that, it rarely happens very much. We've partnered with Pearson that because of their national presence, they are approaching national level employers that have a tuition benefit that they offer to their employees and saying, hey, if we could take that, help you structure that tuition benefit and get your employees to a high quality online program, would you allow us to help structure that? And so for the first time, we have a dynamic expansion of out-of-state online students. And what's amazing about this is that it was highly disruptive and innovation for the processes for the college. And student services had to turn many things upside down. Business services had to turn many things upside down. They really rose to the occasion to make this work for Pearson and the various employment partners it engages. The benefit of that is that it now is helping the workforce as they approach their partners of giving them online opportunities. And so it's accelerated that responsiveness that we can have for regional employment partners that Ian Rourke in his area is leading as a benefit. And so what I'd like to end with is an illustration of what innovation looks like and how important this is for impacting student opportunity and transforming their lives with education and effectiveness in online learning. And so what I'd like to do is just take you through a Whoops, I hope this can share here. To make this full size here. What I want to tell you briefly about is an illustrative example of the America's Cup. America's Cup is a very long-standing boat race, and it's been in place since 1851. It's one of the oldest trophies that can be earned in international sport. And of course, it's all about speed on the water that's measured in the knot. And so in 1871, here we have an example of the Columbia, and the average speed was 10 knots for this boat. So they kept trying to configure and reconfigure the boat and the sails of the structure. And here we have in 1893, the Valkyrie 2 was the winner, but really the average speed was still about 10 knots. We go forward to 1958, the Columbia, a totally different sail structure that you can see here. Still, the average speed right around 10 knots. I remember this in high school from 1983, incredibly controversial, putting wings on the keel of the boat. They wondered if it was illegal, but still the average speed was not much above 10 knots, going to 11 knots. Until we come to an innovation in 2013, the AC-45 catamaran that boosted the speed a huge leap forward to 40 knots. And you can see what this looks like. Oh, and we're not getting any volume, but basically what they implemented was a 6-story wing that they put on a boat that boosted their speed to over 40 knots on average, and they describe it as sailing in a hurricane. So where did we see this in Pima Online? This type of innovation and leap forward took place in open education resources. The students came forward to say, hey, we'd really like the prices of these textbooks to change. And not only was it stagnant, it just kept getting higher. But here was our pathway to try to help the students see how we could reduce costs for the students with OER. I was thankful to be able to present with Mark Hanna at the American Community College Council's Professional Development Conference last October, where he brought together various leaders from other colleges to try to share with board leadership how dynamic of an impact this could have and how board members could support it. And so what does that look like? Very little savings and only cost expansion taking place for students, to an impact of $4.5 million in savings today. And I'm jumping the gun a little bit here. We are not quite at $1 million of savings every semester. We are at $930,000 a semester. But this is why a focus on innovation is important for our college and institution, and why the chancellor, I think, advocates so dynamically for it, is it not only prevents us from being left behind, it truly has a dynamic impact on our community. Think of this, almost $1 million that students did not have to spend, $930,000 last spring that they could utilize as they needed for their families, for other needs that they had, and for our community. That's really all I had to share. As society looks to higher education as a source of innovation, we need to address these to fuel economic vitality for our community.
Thank you very much, Mr. Amick. Are there any questions? Mr. Hanna.
Thank you, Michael. Great presentation. So lately, we've heard much concern about our online programs, or in general, online, not just Pima, but online programs everywhere using outsourced instruction. So what's the policy? What are we doing here at Pima? Are we Are we using our own faculty, our local faculty to do our online instruction? Do we outsource any of it? Can you tell us what's going on there?
We absolutely utilize our own faculty for our instruction. And part of our HLC accreditation requires that our faculty are involved with the curriculum that's being offered and in the development of that. And so our instructional design process identifies a subject matter expert from our faculty to ensure that the curriculum being offered and created is also a part of what's going on. In some cases, we have now started to pilot help from an instructional design third party, but that is absolutely driven, again, by our subject matter experts here at the college. And so, yes, we do have our faculty are the instructors, and it is a combination of full-time and adjunct faculty.
So would you say that the expansion of our online offerings actually allows us to perhaps at some point expand our faculty employment or give additional hours or really boost our own employment of our own faculty?
I would say yes. It's going to be critical that we have a robust online learning environment so that we can continue to offer that. I don't know if Lee, you have comments about this. I've heard you speak to this, that this sort of shift in skill is important for faculty. And we have done a lot to ensure that professional development to help faculty be viable instructors in this environment. And the faculty resource centers have really taken part of that now and expanded into that during this COVID time. In fact, we had 400 people go through and pass our 5-week online instructor course this summer.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Amick. Our final presentation is a look at academics with Dr. Lamita Mitchell, our Vice President for Instructional and Academic Operations. And Dr. Mitchell, if there's any, I know we're running short, a little bit short on time now.
We are. So good afternoon, everyone. If we were in a classroom, I'd be tempted to tell you to stand and stretch because we've been sitting for quite a while. But I'm going to go straight into this because there are some fantastic things I would like to share with you. Of course, I don't have time to share everything with you, but you just get my slide ready. George Couros once said, "Technology in the hands of great teachers can be transformational." And this afternoon, I want to share some of that with you so you can see the transformational things that have been happening in the classroom at Pima Community College. So there's 2 young men in this slide who are playing a duet. What you probably won't realize is that Jordan on the left is playing his part of the duet in Tucson, and Alex is playing his in Nogales, Mexico. The arts department has created virtual art exhibits that show the work of the students and the faculty. And then the theater department faculty have been working on doing live streaming of their events this semester and next semester. So as you can see, when we take technology and mix it with art, we always come up with something innovative. I want to talk next about the math department. The math division participated in an active learning academy philosophies led by Kylie Segas, and as a result, applied the active learning principles to their virtual classrooms. And in this example, students are using their mouse or other writing tools at home to contribute values fitting the provided equation.
Well, actually, I'm just going to organize the table. You guys are going to create the table of values. So I'm going to share my whiteboard with everyone here. So now that when you take your mouse over, you can see your name. And I want you to take, hopefully everybody is prepared and has their paper and pencil, and graph paper actually really helps today. So I want you to write down this equation, select an X value, and calculate the corresponding Y value. So what I want to do is collect 4 or 5 points over here from you guys. Feel free to use positives, negatives, small numbers, big numbers.
All right, I'm going to stop it there. In this next slide, what you're seeing is an example of a math faculty's graphical classroom. In place of using the generic D2L navigation manual, the professor has replicated a graphic version of her classroom. What I cannot show you this afternoon is what happens when you click on all of these things. So if you're interested in what happens when you click on the study room, or who's in the study room, or what happens when you click on the schedule or the telephone, you'll have to reach out to Anna and ask her to give you a tour of all of the things that happens when you click on these areas. The other example I want to share with you is from the science division. This slide is an example of the geology professor's use of photosphere in a virtual field trip. The science division has been using the cell phone's self-guide field trip capabilities to create virtual field trips. So if you look at this, and this is really fascinating to me. I'm going to move quickly, move it up. I hope you can see this, but as you move your mouse, there are various views of this that you can see. And I'll leave you to go in and play with that on your own time. The other slide I wanted to share with you, oh, it's gonna go back. Guess it doesn't want us to leave, huh? Is what the anatomy and physiology professors are using. They're using something called the visual body that involves reality and body systems as they teach anatomy and physiology to the students. What I wanted to share with you this afternoon is that the deans who work closely with me and I have been discussing what it means to reimagine the community college. And one area that we have spent time unpacking is how transfer courses can integrate exposure to skills our students are expected to demonstrate on the job. So in this next slide, the computer aid design team has been working with the University of Arizona as they meet with industry employees seeking 3D printing skills that can be offered to their employees. It's partnerships like these that help us to implement our innovative ideas. Because we have been engaging in these conversations amongst ourselves and with external stakeholders, we're able to move forward on making sure curriculum is relevant, vibrant, and engaging. The deans were able to help faculty pivot to the virtual modality delivery this spring because they had worked with Dr. Moses and myself in creating a plan so that instruction could resume after spring break despite the COVID interruption, and so that the instruction that was offered to our students remained focused on being engaging. The following slides that I want to share with you will show you how the welding students have taken the skills that they learned in the CAD program to help them with an assignment that they were doing in the welding class using the laser cutter and the robotic arm. So that is what we're talking about when we ask, how do we make sure the transfer and the CTE courses work closely together, that the students develop the competencies they need to be successful? The final slide that I want to share with you this afternoon is the one showing the virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI for short. Courses such as CSI and Vet Tech are using virtual desktop infrastructure so that students can access classroom software using their Chromebook, Macs, tablets, or mobile devices from wherever they are. Not only does VDI permit students the opportunity to expand their digital literacy, but it also helps them to learn how important it is to be able to adapt to different work environments as we have seen in our new normal. As you can see, the Transfer Gen Ed faculty are demonstrating how we have stopped thinking of technology in terms of nouns such as PowerPoint, YouTube, Twitter, innovation, and have begun thinking of technology in terms of verbs such as presenting, sharing, collaborating, stretching, communicating, innovating, and educating. They're doing this because Pima's faculty understand that education is the pathway to innovation.
Dr. Mitchell, that was excellent. Are there any questions from the board?
Yeah, Chairman Klinko.
Dr. Hay.
So thank you, Dr. Mitchell. That was an excellent presentation. You know, we started the whole conversation today with us being asked about imagine the future without the internet, et cetera. But also from your presentation, the innovation is extraordinary, and yet hands-on learning is always going to be essential for many of these tasks, whether you're learning how to put in an IV line or fix an engine or do the 3D printing. That even though we're moving our content online, that in-person learning, I think, is going to still be absolutely essential, which I think is why we need these centers of excellence to really bring students to the problem and learn how to deal with a problem in person.
Absolutely. And what we noticed during the spring, we being the deans and myself, is that the faculty embrace this challenge of how are we going to continue to engage students in this new environment, and took it as an opportunity to take it to the next level, to show the students and to demonstrate themselves how flexible they were and how you need to be able to adapt to what is in front of you. But they were adamant that the connection with the students, the engaging with the students, the walking alongside the students as they acquire these competencies had to be a part of what we were doing. And I think that's what they demonstrated so excellently this last semester and this semester.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions?
So Meredith, I just want to build off of your point, because one of the things I say to faculty, you're going to be more needed now than ever, because that human connection, at the end of the day, it comes back to that human connection. Yes, the machines and those events, they help, but they never will take away from that reality. But it requires the faculty to know how to leverage the technologies, like Lamada was saying, move from a noun to a verb so that you can do more. And that's what we're seeing at Pima now. And so I'm just so proud to see things are really starting to come together in these areas.
And Lee, do you think in the last 5 minutes that we have together on this study session, if you could just talk a little bit about the TRAIN partnership and how that fits into a lot of the different themes that we're talking about, and just sort of highlight that partnership?
So let me put that in a context. Remember, I talk about the 5 gaps that we have to close as a college, or colleges, really. One of them is the sustainability gap. Sustainability gap, one facet of that is this whole notion of the green economy, the clean economy, et cetera. But really, when you think about all the gaps, they all intersect. So one of the challenges we have had is, how do you connect the built environment with our educational mission of the institution? And so how do we bring those together and solve these other problems like the sustainability gap? And so Bill and I have been talking about this from since I got hired, about how do we connect the academic and the physical plant of the college into one seamless platform. Well, we can't do that without finding a partner that's going to allow us to connect our solar, our buildings, our other energy aspects of what we do into a platform that integrates the two. So that's what's driving the need to look for a partner. So then that's why we went out for an RFP, because I don't know how many people out there could help us connect the physical with the academic side. Fortunately, TRAIN was really the only player out there who submitted that could actually do that for us. And so now we're integrating the two to really solve that problem of the sustainability gap. So our students will be prepared to help us address climate change, to address the need to be better with energy management. And so that's what it is in a nutshell. But again, you tie it to this larger issue of sustainability. And our workforce is going to be powered. Lots of opportunities going to exist in these areas, but it will require our students to be able to use the technology tools coupled with their human components to do better. And again, you have to find a partner to do that. This is not privatizing the college. As you've heard, a lot of what we just displayed for you was all about partnerships. You can't do this great work of innovation without it. But it does require that you find partners who are capable of helping you and who have had a history of working with education. So a lot of the partners you've seen showcased today were partners who work with education and have been doing so for years. And so I'll answer any questions about that.
Dr. Hay has a question.
So Chancellor Lambert, so that seems to me it's so important. If one of our #1 missions is to train the workforce and to retrain Southern Arizona's workforce for this new economy, and we have to have the private sector as our partner, because those are going to be the employers of our students. You know, and so often, as you all know, all the faculty on the call, as faculty we get so engaged with the academia, we forget about the practical application. What does the employer want? So having a private sector with us and designing and thinking about what do they need out of their employees, and how can we train them to be great employees and be hired first off the line when they graduate from Pima. I think that's so essential to have that public-private partnership that's robust, and everything you're doing, I think, is just right on the mark.
Well, thank you, Meredith. And I, just for everybody's sake, you know, when there's been surveys of the employers' perceptions of graduates and then the school's perceptions of their graduates, and there's a huge disconnect. Employers don't think we're preparing our graduates very well for the world of work, but yet we believe we're doing it very well. Well, at Pima, we've integrated these two together so that we will do this very well. And by the way, I didn't get a chance to showcase a lot of other innovations at the college. I could have had Irene showcase some of the great work that's happening in student services now. We could have had, build off of the great work that Bill and his team has been doing with the academic side to integrate. Again, the TRAIN is an example of that, right? could have shown what financial aid and registration of records been doing, what we've been doing. So when we focus on those 5 gaps you hear me talk about, this is what you get. But partnerships are essential. But that doesn't mean we're going private. I think some people have mistaken that because we're partnering, we're going private. It's the opposite of that. And so we're showing this community and all of you the great stuff. And I'm just so pleased that people have bought into that vision, and that you as a board or your predecessors on the board decided to bring me here because they knew of the NC3, they knew about the IBEST, they knew of all this great innovation we were doing, and why not bring it here to Pima and put the Pima spin on it. And you see the Pima spin is taking it to a whole new level. And I'm just proud I can be part of that for this community. Thank you.
Well, Lee, I just want to thank you on behalf of the board for taking up the gauntlet on these issues and really addressing and straight on this idea of innovative dynamic partnership. I think public-private partnerships are really the future, and how we're going to survive and how we're going to respond to ensure that our students are prepared for the very work that employers need. And through your leadership and everyone on this call today, and I know throughout the entire institution, the cultural shift to begin to address and embrace this type of thinking is taken a huge lift, and it's no small feat. And so thank you for your continued leadership in this.
So let me say this, Damien. Thank you for that. But it takes each of us working together. I mean, that's what it comes down to. It's not because of one individual, but it's because we all collectively have bought into a vision, and the board is essential to that. Without the board's strength and backing, because change is not easy, as you know, but you start to see phenomenal results. I'll say this one last thing. I don't know if Nick wants to add to this, but I want to thank Nick for bringing all of this together today and all the presenters. But also, we didn't share with you all of the data pieces, but I'll just note, for example, if you look at the 6-year successful outcome rate, Pima is at 61%. Nationally, it's 58%. If you look at graduation rates, Pima is at 35%. Nationally, it's at 23%. So you're seeing that we're not neglecting the student and the learner at the end of the day. Because we're doing all this innovative stuff, we are paying attention to the data, the impact to our students, and taking seriously that we need to continue to close gaps when we have them, but also recognize that we're doing a lot better than sometimes folks realize. And again, it comes down to us as people working together because we have a common shared commitment ultimately to equity and justice for our students and community.
Thank you very much, Lee. We really appreciate the work of everyone in the institution. So with that, our meeting is adjourned. You have a wonderful evening. Thank you.